On a quiet Saturday morning, the diner smelled of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon. At a corner booth, an elderly black man with a weathered military jacket sipped his tea, quietly observing the room. He had served his country decades ago, but today, in a place that should have been safe, he was about to face a different kind of battle. A younger man, broad-shouldered, impatient, and clearly spoiling for a fight, stormed in and set his sights on the veteran. What started as muttered insults soon turned into a public humiliation that left the diner stunned. No one in that room knew who the veteran's son was, or what would happen next. The diner sat at the edge of a small Midwestern town, a familiar stop for locals on weekend mornings. The walls were lined with old photographs of the town's history, parades, baseball games, and faded portraits of soldiers who had served in past wars. Among those who came often was Mr. Samuel Carter, a 72-year-old retired Army sergeant. His posture was still straight despite the years. His hands were rough, his eyes carried a lifetime of discipline and quiet resilience. Samuel always ordered the same breakfast: oatmeal, a side of toast, and chamomile tea. Most mornings were uneventful. A few regulars greeted him respectfully, but he mostly kept to himself, preferring the calm corner booth that faced the entrance. On that particular morning, the diner was half full, a young couple at the window, two mechanics on their lunch break, and a few teenagers hunched over their phones. The hum of soft conversation and the clink of cutlery created a comforting rhythm, until the door swung open. A man in his mid-30s strode in, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. He wore a black leather jacket and carried himself with a restless energy, scanning the room as if searching for someone to challenge. His gaze landed on Samuel. The man frowned, muttered something under his breath, and sat at the counter. At first, his grumblings were barely audible, something about old-timers taking up space. But his tone grew louder, enough for others to shift uneasily in their seats. Samuel kept his eyes on his tea. Decades of service had taught him patience, but that morning his quiet dignity would be tested in front of everyone. The man at the counter, later identified as Tyler Briggs, seemed intent on drawing attention. He slammed his coffee cup on the counter when the waitress brought it, scowled at her, and muttered more insults, this time directed toward Samuel. At first, most customers pretended not to hear, but a few glanced at Samuel, wondering whether he would respond. The veteran simply folded his hands, his expression unchanged. Tyler's voice grew louder. "Guy like that just sitting here, probably expecting everyone to thank him for what he did decades ago," he scoffed, to no one in particular. The waitress, visibly uncomfortable, asked him to lower his voice. He ignored her, turning on his stool to face Samuel directly. "Hey, old man," he said, "what's the point of you even being here? You think you deserve special treatment?" A hush fell over the diner. Conversation stopped. The couple by the window glanced nervously at each other. Samuel looked up briefly, meeting Tyler's glare with a steady, calm gaze, then returned to his tea. That quiet response seemed to fuel the younger man's anger. He pushed himself up from the stool and strode toward Samuel's table. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Tyler barked. Samuel slowly raised his eyes again, saying nothing. It was this silence, this unshakable composure, that Tyler found unbearable. In a flash of anger, he raised his hand and struck the veteran across the face. Gasps erupted around the diner. A waitress dropped a tray. The teenagers lowered their phones in shock. For a moment, it felt as if the entire room had frozen. Samuel didn't retaliate. He simply straightened his jacket, keeping his eyes fixed on Tyler without a word. That calm, dignified defiance unsettled the aggressor far more than any shouted reply could have. Before Tyler could speak again, the bell above the diner's door chimed. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a navy blue suit entered, glancing quickly around the room. His presence was immediately commanding, not just because of his size, but because of the quiet authority he carried. His eyes landed on Samuel first. The faint redness on the older man's cheek then shifted to Tyler. The diner held its collective breath as the newcomer's expression hardened. The suited man stepped forward with a purposeful stride. Conversations that had begun to murmur in the background fell silent again. "Dad," the man said in a voice that was both warm and edged with steel, "are you all right?" A wave of realization swept over the room. The veteran's son, Michael Carter, wasn't just any concerned family member. He was the regional director for Homeland Security, a man accustomed to making critical decisions under pressure. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, but tried to mask it with bravado. "This doesn't concern you," he muttered. Michael's eyes locked on him. His tone remained calm, but there was a firmness that silenced even the faintest whisper in the diner. "It concerns me when someone assaults a 72-year-old veteran in broad daylight," he said. "It concerns me even more when that veteran happens to be my father." A murmur rippled through the diners. Several people who had hesitated to intervene now felt emboldened by Michael's presence. One of the mechanics stood halfway, ready to step in if needed. Tyler's earlier swagger faltered. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, searching for a way out. But Michael didn't raise his voice or take a threatening stance. Instead, he simply stepped closer, his expression unwavering. "You're going to stay right here," Michael said. "The authorities are on their way." The weight of his words sank in. Tyler glanced around, noticing for the first time that almost everyone in the diner was watching him. Not with fear, but with condemnation. His earlier dominance had evaporated. For Samuel, the moment wasn't about vengeance. He looked at his son with quiet gratitude, then turned his gaze back to Tyler, not with anger, but with a kind of solemn disappointment that seemed to cut deeper than any harsh words could. Within minutes, the local police arrived, called by the diner's manager. Witnesses recounted what they had seen. Tyler, who had entered the diner so full of arrogance, was now silent as he was escorted out in handcuffs. The atmosphere in the diner slowly began to ease. Some patrons approached Samuel, expressing their respect and apologizing for not speaking up sooner. The waitress refilled his tea, her hands still trembling slightly, but her voice steady. Michael stayed by his father's side, a quiet pillar of support. They didn't need many words. Their bond, forged by years of shared experiences and mutual respect, spoke louder than anything. Outside the diner, a few people lingered, reflecting on what had unfolded. It was a sobering reminder that the battles fought by veterans like Samuel had not erased all forms of injustice. Even decades after his service, he had faced an attack rooted not in anything he had done, but in prejudice. As they prepared to leave, Samuel paused at the doorway. He looked back at the diners, his voice calm yet resonant. "We can't control the hatred in others," he said, "but we can decide whether we'll let it spread." Those words lingered long after he and Michael walked out. The incident became a topic of conversation in the community for weeks. Some said it was the moment that opened their eyes to the quiet strength carried by people like Samuel, and to the need to stand up when dignity and respect are threatened. In the end, what endured wasn't just the confrontation itself, but the lesson it carried, that real strength isn't shown in striking others down, but in standing firm, dignified, and refusing to be diminished. And for those who witnessed it, one question remained. How many moments of injustice go unchecked simply because bystanders stay silent?